Okay, so 3 years from now, you can.
Yeah, but if you don't start, it'll never happen.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, I think many landlords don't understand the importance of mediation when they go to the landlord-tenant board, and specifically including or referencing Section 78 that you've talked about in the past.
Right.
So can you just outline, if you get an appointment with the landlord-tenant board, is it still all through Zoom?
It is.
Okay,
it's
if
video
you get,
hearings. Yeah.
So if you get a video hearing, how do you get to mediation today, and what's the importance of Section 78?
Okay, so if everybody remembers, during COVID, they were sending out case management hearings, which was only a hearing with a mediator and the parties to the application. They're not doing that anymore because it was a waste of time. Nobody felt the urgency of pending eviction because they can't force an order. Okay, so now when you log into a video hearing, you sign in. I'll just walk you through the process so they understand. You sign in. They ask you at that time if you're interested in mediation. There are mediators there. They call them dispute resolution officers. If you say yes, then you can be put into a separate video room with the mediator and see if the parties can either narrow the issues or reach terms on consent. This is key because if you're able to reach terms on consent and the order has something called Section 78 in it, that means that if the parties default on any of those terms, then the landlord has a right to file an application to terminate the tenancy without notice to the tenant, because they're saying you all agreed on these terms, we wrote it down in an order, and now you have to follow it. And if you don't, your tenancy is terminated.
Do you have to ask the mediator to specifically include this Section 78 thing? What is it, wording? Or?
Yeah, so the mediator, if it's an unrepresented party, they're fairly good about asking you if that's what you want, and then they have to explain it to both parties. But if you have a representative, they should be asking for it.
Okay. And then so mediation is advantageous because maybe you can come to some resolution. Both parties agree. If somebody breaks that agreement, you can move towards eviction without going through a hearing.
Right.
Okay.
You just file an application that says, hey, we had this order, we made this agreement, and they defaulted, and now we want termination. So they issue an order in writing. The other good thing is that everybody feels like they have the best case in the world. But when it goes before the adjudicator, it could be a different story because there's two sides to every story, and the adjudicator has a lot of discretionary power. Plus, they have a lot to consider for both parties, especially in this time because they're trying to save a lot of tenancies or give the tenants an opportunity to save the tenancies. So they consider Section 83 issues. Those mean, is there circumstances that they should be aware of that would make them allow the tenancy to continue, maybe on a conditional order, so the tenant's not allowed to do certain things. That is what they want to do. So if you go before the board adjudicator, you might not be getting what you want. So oftentimes when you're in mediation, the control is still within the parties to make an agreement. So it will get you what you want. And if not, then it's corrected the behavior.
And I guess you must deal with a number of investors or property owners that are kind of set in their ways, and they go to the mediation. They're like, no, look, I'm owed $5,000. I want $5,000. I don't care. And I'm sure there's probably some advice, I'm guessing that you're saying, hey, look, for time, energy, risk of going to the adjudicator, maybe just kind of, it's okay, like take less and just move on from this and try to make something work. Because I know when we deal with a lot of investors, the people that just see things as black and white, sometimes with them, you kind of want to shake them a bit and say, hey, look, there's got to be kind of give on both sides sometimes, especially when there's actual real circumstances involved. And it's not just someone that's like has a historical pattern of trying to rip people off or, conning people, that type of thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are some people who do have that mindset. And sometimes the situation calls for that mindset, but as legal representatives, we can advise, but we work for them. So we have to do what they tell us to do, basically. The way I approach it is, if you have all of the information before you, then you can make an educated decision as to what you want to do and what you want to try to achieve. If I've given you all that information and you still tell me to go for it and you don't get it, then that's not my fault, right? So at the same time, certain situations call for, no, we're going to play hardball here. We're not going to mediate because there's been enough of a loss, enough of a damage where you're rolling the dice that you're going to get an 11-day termination rather than giving them a chance.
Yeah. I'm sure you've been sandbagged sometimes. So you're going into something, you think you know all the details, and then you're at the hearing or the mediation, and something comes from the other side. You're like, so you just Is it just
Absolutely.
is it just poker face at that time? You're like, oh,
No, I usually ask to stand the matter down so you can speak to your client. But that has happened. It's so funny that
must
you
be
say
the
that.
worst, no? Because then
Yeah.
you're just like, oh, like why didn't you tell me that? You
Yeah.
know. So-
Yeah, usually that happens if like the other side doesn't submit supporting evidence to it.
Yeah.
Because I've had them where a landlord has said, no, I didn't get paid this rent, or they didn't fix this. And then when the evidence comes, there's a receipt of payment that they gave, and they're like, oh, I forgot. Or they're like, no, it was late, so it wasn't. Like, they make excuses. But at the same time, that only happens usually if someone doesn't submit the evidence to support their position.